This is Headline Humboldt. I'm James Faulk. Thanks for joining us. For much of the COVID pandemic, Humboldt County was relatively sheltered, a local island of somewhat reasonable infection rates amid a state that at times teetered under the burden of sickness and death. Yet as we all know and begin now to collectively emerge from the COVID calamity, Humboldt County's infection rates and ratios are among the worst in the state. The sudden reversal of our progress was enough to have local officials worried that we may once again slip into a more restrictive red tier, threatening much of the economic and social progress we'd made in reopening. But officials said this week that adjustments to those tier standards at the state level now make that change more unlikely, if still possible. This week, Humboldt County saw 45 infections in a single day, the most since this past January, the height of our ongoing battle with the disease. The reason, officials say, is because the UK variant has begun to dominate local infections, and this strain is particularly infectious. Couple that with large gatherings held by folks who've yet to get the vaccine, and you've well explained how we've gotten to this point. But amid the bad news, there are still significant signs of progress. While infection rates are up, the hospitalization rates are down. We've also continued to make progress in vaccinating our population with a new and pivotal group added just this week to the targeted populations. The Centers for Disease Control announced this week that kids aged 12 to 15 are now able to receive the Pfizer vaccine. Clinics and gatherings to offer those shots are likely to be held this weekend and in the coming weeks. To get your vaccination shot or to schedule a 12 to 15-year-old for theirs, visit myturn.ca.gov. Meanwhile, a recent local turn toward addressing the crimes of the past continues this month, which also happens to be Asian and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. A group of local residents and activists have been working behind the scenes with the city of Eureka to locate and honor Eureka's old Chinatown, the section of downtown that was the site of the infamous Chinese exclusion in 1885. The past couple of years have seen a transformation of sorts, as the Eureka City Council has taken several steps to acknowledge the misdeeds of its forebears. First, returning a portion of Indian Island back to the Yurok Tribe, the site of the 1862 massacre, and now this effort to remember yet another sin of the past. The effort so far is young, only a month old, but momentum has built quickly toward getting this done. At a time when Asian and Pacific Islander communities have faced significant vitriol and misplaced blame for the COVID-19 pandemic, Eureka has chosen to acknowledge and rectify, as much as is possible, those sins of the past. Growth and perspective come at long last. Now, the interview. Brieanne Mirjah has been working with a dedicated collection of folks for several weeks now in moving this Chinatown project forward. It's about remembering our past and those the city has left behind.
Yeah, so the Eureka Chinatown Project is a community effort in collaboration with the HAPI group, which is the Humboldt Asian and Pacific Islanders group in solidarity. And we are working to commemorate what used to be the old Chinatown before the 1885 expulsion of the Chinese. And so this block where Chinatown used to stand is between 4th and 5th and E and F in Eureka. And we are working on a few different projects to commemorate that Chinatown. We'd like to put in a plaque to say that Chinatown did once stand here. We are working on renaming the alleyway that runs through that block to, again, mention that Chinatown was in this location. And then we're also working on a couple of wayfinding signs with the city of Eureka. Those are those tall metal structures that you see around Old Town, and have some information about the life of the Chinese as well as the expulsion of 1885 on those wayfinding signs. And then last but definitely not least, we are working on a really big mural that will go in that alleyway behind Coast Central. It's actually on the back of Savage Henry Comedy Club. Mm-hmm. And that mural is about 21 by 60 feet. And we are hoping to celebrate the life of the Chinese that were once here, as well as tie it into the life of the Chinese Americans that are here today in Humboldt.
Yeah, now, so the events of 1885 were pretty horrific, and it's sort of become a legend up and down the state as one of the more horrific instances of Chinese exclusion. Can you talk a little bit about what happened, all those years ago?
Yeah, so the events of 1885 were actually a local reaction to what was happening in the country as a whole. In 1882, we saw the Chinese Exclusion Act passed, And so nationally, there was already this rising anti-Chinese sentiment. We had gone into an economic depression after the Civil War, and for some reason, the Chinese seemed to be that scapegoat, seemed to be that excuse for the reason why there were no more jobs. And here in Humboldt, they were also feeling that stress and that pressure. So, it was definitely leading up to it. It wasn't necessarily just a few events that did lead to the expulsion of the Chinese. But ultimately, in February of 1885, there was a councilman that was walking by Chinatown and was caught in a crossfire between two Chinese gangs and ultimately died. And because of that, the townspeople rallied and they rioted, and they ultimately wanted to burn down Chinatown. However, there were a few people that kind of stood up and said, no, we can't do that. Also, the land that Chinatown once stood on was owned by a white man as well. So they ultimately compromised in a way, or voted not to necessarily burn down Chinatown and instead expel all of their Chinese residents. Which at that time, it's really hard to say exactly how many, but probably close to 500 between Chinatown and then the surrounding areas. And so they were basically sent on ships within 24 hours down to San Francisco and found their new home in San Francisco's Chinatown.
Mm-hmm. Now, these people lost their homes, their businesses. It was really a traumatic series of events. I've done a little bit of reporting on it before. You mentioned the vote. There was actually a sort of a makeshift or ad hoc town hall meeting where people gave their ideas about what should be done with the Chinese, and it's sort of a pitchfork and bonfire kind of injustice that occurred. All the elements that you're going to be putting on with the memorial, how did you guys decide what exactly you wanted to do to commemorate what happened?
Well, it really started off with just the plaque. Just the more I had spoken to people about the Chinese expulsion and that there was a Chinatown here, and others that are in the group learned that, this isn't widely known in our community. So we just wanted to acknowledge it, really, and just say, hey, Chinatown was here. And the Chinese ultimately helped build the West and Humboldt County as we know it. Absolutely. They worked on the Transcontinental Railroad. They helped build many roads here in the county, including the one that goes out from Ferndale to Petrolia. They were farmers. They owned laundries. They were integral members of our community, and we wanted to celebrate that. Yeah. After that, we actually got in touch. We have a really, really talented and experienced group that's working on the Chinatown Project, and we started to make connections. We got in touch with the city of Eureka, and they had some ideas. So really, it's a full community effort to get to where we are now, when really it's all just stemmed from this one idea to just say, hey, Chinatown is here. And now we have a full suite of different projects that we're working on that will help to commemorate the old Chinatown and also celebrate the Chinese. But it's also the first step, right? This is our first exposure of the Chinese and the Chinese history here in our community. Mm-hmm. So we would love to build further from it. This is just kind of laying down the groundwork so we can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned the cooperation with the city of Eureka. There's been sort of a revolution or an evolution of sorts within the city where they've begun to really try and rectify some of the things that happened in the past. They recently returned a portion of the Indian Islands to the Yurok Tribe for the atrocities that occurred in the 1860s out there. And I'm interested to hear that they are sort of bending over backward to help you guys get this project done. Is there something about this time period, do you think, or the particular makeup of the council that's allowed this kind of evolution, or where would you assign the credit for that?
Well, I think that this is something that's a long time coming, that we kind of needed to acknowledge the past, and we ultimately can't move forward without acknowledging the past and learning from it.
I think this is a long time coming, but I really want to thank Mayor Seaman, City Manager Slattery, and Community Services Director Wood with helping us with all of that.
And being so enthusiastic about the project, as well as all the city council members. I can't say whether or not, previous members of the city would feel the same way.
Yeah.
But I do also think that it is timely and that we are experiencing a lot of rage and hate throughout the country against Chinese and AAPI residents. And it makes sense. But this isn't something that is, a new phenomenon. Yeah. AAPI hate isn't new in this country. It's been going on for a long time. So, I really appreciate everything that's been happening. And I feel like it's really great momentum to keep moving forward.
Yeah. That's one of the interesting arguments, is that a lot of people think that these events like slavery and the pre-Civil War, that they were a long time ago and that we're a vastly different people now. But that's not necessarily belied by the facts. I mean, there seem to be these, outbreaks of hate that happen every so often in this country. Right now, the COVID disaster, for instance, has sparked a lot of hatred toward Chinese Americans because of the perception that the disease comes from China. So do you think that we've actually changed that much over time, or where are we at right now, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, our country is definitely different, but there's just this deep-rooted anti-Chinese sentiment or anti-Asian racism that's really, it's embedded in our culture. So it's not something that's going to change overnight. We've seen this happen time and time again. Even now we're being blamed. Chinese are being blamed for taking jobs. That was the case back in the 1800s, right?
Yeah.
Vincent Chin, that was in the 80s. These are all things that have happened time and time again. We are also being blamed for COVID and the pandemic. And in Eureka, the Chinatown was blamed for being dirty and filthy and disease-riddled, because not necessarily because of the people, but because there was, poor drainage that ran through that part of town that they were confined to.
Absolutely.
And the city didn't do anything about it, right? So we see this time and time again, and ultimately that's why this project is so important, because we can't move forward unless if we learn from what's happened in the past. We're just going to keep repeating it over and over again.
Yeah. So now, to bring in other people in the community who may be interested in either partaking or contributing, if someone wants to get involved in this effort, how can they do that? And if they want to donate money or resources, where should they send the material?
Yeah, and we would love to have anyone who is interested to join us or support the project. There's still so much more that we can do. So ideas and efforts are definitely welcome. We're just getting up and running, so our website will be up soon. But until then, you can email us. We're at the Eureka Chinatown Project at gmail.com. And you can also find us on Instagram as well, Eureka Chinatown Project.
Yeah. One of the things that this month is Asian and Pacific Islander Awareness Month. Every month they set aside, different groups and try to honor them culturally. Part of me wonders if it would be better off to try and honor all people all the time, rather than pretend like, during this month we're going to honor this group and then kind of forget all the rest. How important do you think it is that we have months like this or events like this to, try and bring to the forefront of public consciousness the individual groups and efforts?
I think they're important. Especially to focus in on one specific topic, only if we can use that month or that time period to launch into something further. Mm-hmm. If we use that month as an excuse to not pay attention to that topic for the rest of the year, it becomes detrimental, right? So if we're only going to talk about AAPI issues for the next 2 weeks, then I would say, scratch the whole thing altogether. But really, they are helpful if we all can commit to putting in the hard work even after this month is over. If we continue to have those courageous conversations, if we continue to self-reflect and see how we can each do better. That's how I feel like these are most beneficial. But again, if that isn't the case, then we shouldn't keep going with them. I feel like we have really gained a lot of support in this month. Which, as for the project, is really exciting to see. And I hope to foster those relationships and those people that have come forward to continue to support the project and AAPI issues moving forward.
Yeah. You know, Humboldt County is largely white. I mean, you're probably very aware of that. For people who are allies of the Asian Pacific Islanders or other groups, what can they do proactively within their communities and within their families and elsewhere to combat racism, whether it's because of COVID or old assumptions about, you know, the nature of people and their identities or whatnot? How can individual people combat those ideas, do you think, most effectively?
Yeah, you know, I think it's going to be different for every person, but I would probably say if it feels uncomfortable, that's probably the right thing to do. You know, we need to have these conversations within our families, within our close groups of friends, from people that trust us to kind of maybe see a different perspective. I encourage everyone to continue to follow different groups and activists within the community that are trying to raise awareness and culture. And we need to keep doing these things for generations. It's not something that's going to change overnight. We need to work with each other. We need to give each other grace in this time, and know that it's new, but as long as we keep trying, we have an opportunity for change. And I feel hopeful about that.
Well, that's pretty much all I had for you. If there's anything else that you want to, you know, submit or mention, I'd be happy to include it.
Yeah, I think that's really great. I really appreciate the time today and just allowing me to just speak about the project as well as what's going on in our community. I think just kind of the last thing I wanted to say is that I hope that this project does help to create a more inclusive future for us here in Humboldt County. And it is something that we can all feel welcomed in and have a home in and ultimately feel safe in. So thank you.
Absolutely. I think that's the most important thing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, James.
Yeah, have a good night. We'll be right back after this short break.
Hospitals in crisis.
A hospital that mostly serves low-income people.
What's the lay of the land out there?
Difficult. The essential hospitals that are in urban markets, they're always living hand to mouth.
In a system driven by disparity.
The structural racism of how we pay for health care.
Frontline and NPR investigate.
In the rules that we have set up, there are winners and there are losers.
This is unacceptable.
The healthcare divide.
On Studio Space, Conrad Kalimpong's ceramics are made with traditional techniques. Find out more about why he works with a wood-fire kiln to create ceramics that are imbued with a sense of history and connected to the natural world. Laura Kinatos is a local printmaker and teacher. Her darkly humorous work is drawn from life experience. Studio Space explores the thriving art colony in Northern California.
With the Pfizer vaccine now available to kids aged 12 and 15, Lindsey Mendez of the county's vaccine task force said the time is now for parents to prepare their kids. She also mentioned that help may be on the way for homebound individuals who want the vaccine but lack transportation.
I would urge parents to take the time now and sit down with their children and talk to them about the importance of this vaccine and hopefully getting rid of some fear about needles or vaccinations so that we can end the pandemic sooner and we can all be safer and healthier. With mobile vaccination updates, it's exciting to know that the state of California has helped us with putting a box on My Turn to say if you are homebound and in need of a vaccination because you cannot get to an appointment with your doctor or go to a mass vax. And so we are currently getting these lists from the state of homebound patients so that we can put them into our mobile program. So I'm going to just say that one more time. If you are using My Turn, which hopefully you are to find your vaccine, and you are homebound, there is a box on My Turn when you go to register for your vaccine to say that you cannot make it to your appointment. And we are currently utilizing that in our planning.
Public Health Officer Ian Hoffman said the county has now identified the UK variant as the dominant strain in Humboldt County.
Cases we're seeing are often involving gatherings of folks who are unvaccinated and not using all the precautions that would help stop the spread. We've seen an increase in the UK variant in our community with last week more than 40 samples coming back sequenced for the UK variant. So we know that that's now the dominant strain circulating in Humboldt County. We have seen the hospitalizations come down a bit in the last week, which has been really good news. Although I don't think we're totally out of the woods yet because of our continued drive to look for people who need to get vaccinated, who want to get vaccinated, and overcoming those barriers.
Hoffman also explained why, despite the uptick in our infection rates, that the county has so far avoided higher tier restrictions.
So under the new rules for the blueprint, we have to have both the case count per 100,000 and the test positivity in a more restrictive tier to consider moving backwards into that tier. So last week we had both of those in the red tier, both the case count and the test positivity. We would have to get 2 weeks of that in order to move into the red tier. And on top of that, now they would be looking at our hospitalization rates and our hospital capacity before they would definitely move us back. So this week's case count was still in the red tier, but the test positivity rate came down into the orange tier. So we did not meet both metrics, which allowed us to get an orange tier for this week. Just in general, moving forward with the blueprint, it is much more difficult to become more restrictive in tiers, and that's by design. Now that we have a significant portion of our population vaccinated and protected, the reason for the strong protective public health measures of stay at home and restricting businesses, restricting public places, public movement, was to protect the unvaccinated and protect the hospital capacity. And at this point, we do not have a fear or worry that the hospitals would be overwhelmed with COVID cases. So that's the reason for the rollback of the protections. That's the reason we're moving forward. The state is intent on moving forward with June 15th as the removal of all the blueprint restrictions on businesses and going back to a much more open and normal society.
The Yurok Tribe this week decried what it says is a deadly decision by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation to not release additional water into the Klamath River. The tribe says releasing more water would have helped prevent another massive juvenile fish die-off, which tribal authorities said is already occurring. The tribe acknowledges that the current drought is primarily to blame for the lack of water in the river, but also points to previous water allocation decisions by the government. Right now, the Klamath River is full of dead and dying fish on the Yurok Reservation, said Frankie Myers, Yurok Tribal Vice Chairman. This disease will kill most of the baby salmon in the Klamath, which will impact fish runs for many years to come. For salmon people, a juvenile fish kill is absolutely a worst-case scenario, unquote. The tribe has long been monitoring the fish runs to track the presence of Serotinova Shasta pathogen. On May 4th, the most recent date for which data is available, 97% of the juvenile salmon caught between the Shasta River and Scott River sections of the Klamath River were infected with Shasta. The tribe claims those fish will be dead within days. We'll have more on this story in coming days. A new tally from the North Coast Congressman Jared Huffman's office outlines how much money local coffers can expect from the latest batch of COVID relief and what it can be spent on. The funds were released this week. We have all been hit by the coronavirus pandemic, and there is a long road to recovery ahead, Huffman said. Thanks to the American Rescue Plan, local governments and tribes have access to $350 billion in flexible relief funds to help struggling households and businesses build back better from the pandemic. Counties in Huffman's 2nd District are slated to receive the following: Humboldt County, $26.3 million. Del Norte County, $5.4 million. Mendocino County, $16.8 million, and Trinity County, $2.3 million. Huffman's office said Congress stressed flexibility when allocating the funds. In addition to allowing entities to spend up to their level of associated revenue loss, recipients can use funds to support public health expenditures, address negative economic impacts, aid communities and populations hardest hit by the crisis, provide premium pay for essential workers, and invest in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. And this week's Community Conversations, the City of Eureka features Fin-N-Feather Pet Shop, the longtime Henderson Center stalwart.
Well, I'm Ginger Casanova, and I've owned Fin-N-Feather for almost 41 years. It'll be 41 years in August. And yeah, my husband and I took it over from my in-laws in 1979. We started over at the little shop on Grotto there, and where Dio's sandwich shop was. And it's just grown ever since. We've been blessed. We've been open the whole time during the pandemic, and we are so grateful and thankful for that. You know, being like, just everybody needs their food for their pets and everything, so we were necessary. And yeah, I'm very thankful and grateful that we could be open. Most people are happy, especially in this business. They come in and they're happy about their pets. They want to talk and share. And even through all of this, I wrote the jingle for our pandemic jingle. Well, it was on the radio. Let's see, I don't even know if I remember how it went now. Thank you for shopping with us, standing in line, all the while you still smiled, wearing your mask, always being patient and kind, or something like that. I can't remember how it went. Anyway, so that was a fun jingle, and we've done lots of those. People know us by our advertisements on TV a lot. When I think about Eureka being here, you know, people come in. I mean, we have Dolly that's been here with us like for 40 years, you know, and people come in and they're like, "Is that the same red bird that was here when I was little?" And yeah. And they say, "I remember that when I was coming in, you know, and just a young person." And so it's really, oh, it's just so wonderful to hear people have memories like that. The shelters around here, I mean, they're wonderful, and people come in and ask us, you know, always for advice about where they could, you know, find a dog or a cat and everything. And we have a list of all the shelters, and yeah, we try to point them to the right direction. We just try to do a lot of the shelter things. Right now we have our beanie hat for sale, and half of the proceeds go to shelters. And we try to support all the shelters during Christmas time. We collect the toys. CASA is one of our big donations that we do. We support CASA a lot, and have drawings and sales and things, and a lot of things go towards CASA. Henderson Center organization is, you know, Merchants Association is a big part of Henderson Center, and they help, you know, our area a lot.
That's all the time we have for tonight. Stay tuned, stay informed.